Finally, the Pirates have promoted Paul Skenes. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Thursday, May 9th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White. Today on the show, we've got rankings, risers, and fallers, two pitchers who may have rediscovered their stud status, a bunch of waiver wire options. Honestly, there was way too much going on today, but there's only one place to start, and that is with Paul Skenes, who is the top pitching prospect in all of baseball, arguably the best pitching prospect since Steven Strasburg. The Pirates plan to promote Paul Skenes this weekend. He was the first overall pick in last year's draft. He's 21 years old, a huge right-hander, 6'6", in 7 starts at AAA this year, a .99 ERA, a .91 WHIP, 45 strikeouts over 27 and a third innings. He throws 5 different pitches, but it's mainly a fastball, which averages 99 miles per hour, a wipeout slider, and a splinker. You heard that right. It is a 94, 95 mile per hour splitter sinker hybrid. It's, I think, not far off from the one that like Yohan Duran throws, even though
it's kind of just like some tacked on to his arsenal. It's really the fastball and slider, right?
Yeah, mostly the fastball and slider. Scott, throw it over to you, which look, as soon as we start, you got some internet stuff going on here. So hopefully you are here with me.
I see you. Do you see me?
I do see you now, but there was a little glitchy there. Anyway,
it's almost 1 o'clock. Okay.
What are your expectations? What are your expectations for Paul Skenes? What does the workload look like? And where did you rank him?
Okay. So you said this is maybe the most highly anticipated pitching prospect since Steven Strasburg, and that is my gut feeling as well. However, I will point out that at the time of his promotion, Paul Skenes was already rostered in 90% of CBS sports leagues, which by that metric probably makes him the most highly anticipated pitching prospect, because rarely do you see any minor leaguer rostered that widely across fantasy baseball. So everybody on board with this guy, and they have been for a long time. Whether or not to add him is not even in the discussion, so we have to go a step further here when talking about Paul Skenes. Realistically, what kind of impact can he make in fantasy is the question, because right now there's all the hype, all the fanfare. It's his value is already at a very high point, which makes for potentially a selling opportunity. I know that's sacrilegious or whatever to have waited this long for this guy, and then before he even throws a pitch for your team, you think about selling him. But let's consider what he's actually worth right now, because it may surprise you. So Paul Skenes is really good, as we saw in the minors, but it's important to keep in mind his outings were all very short. There was 1 6-inning outing 2 turns ago, and then he went back to 4 1/3 innings in his latest turn. In that 6-inning outing, he threw 75 pitches. So his arsenal hasn't been tested over like what we would consider a full starter's workload. And I think what happened to him in his latest start when he went 4 1/3 innings, there's some reason for concern there, because Paul Skenes, his appeal is so much built on heat, like he is maybe trending toward being the hardest throwing starting pitcher ever, at least in terms of consistency hitting triple digits. He had 98 pitches of 100 miles per hour or more at AAA. That is more than any major league starting pitcher, any major league pitcher of any kind, but any major league starting pitcher has had this year. Triple-digit fastballs. And remember, Skenes is doing this in very short outings, relatively speaking. So he's in a category of his own as far as velocity goes, and that's key to his success. What happened in his last start when he went 4 1/3 innings, it was his first time starting on 4 days rest, which is typical if you're in a 5-man rotation. He was doing it for the first time. The velocity was a little bit down. It was a little lower than we had been seeing it previously, and he got into a little bit of trouble for the first time. He ended up allowing 2 runs in those 4 1/3 innings. He allowed his first home run of the season. It was on his second slowest fastball of the season. So I wonder if he's really been properly built up to take this on. And I also wonder if the Pirates will, I guess the way I phrased it in the article I wrote, my concerns for Skenes are twofold. Is he truly ready to handle a major league workload? And to what extent will he be allowed to try? I think the skills, the Skenes is so good that on an inning for inning basis, I think, it'll be high quality. But if he's not going 6 innings consistently or even 5 innings necessary for a win, and again, he only reached that once during his entire time in the minors, how impactful can he possibly be in fantasy? So it's not like my concerns are zero for Skenes. Again, a very talented, high upside pitcher. Having said that, I'm ranking him 25th to start out.
Scott, I don't know how you just did the breakdown you did, and you ended it with, but I rank Paul Skenes SP 25.
All right, well, here's my rationale for that. There are a lot of interesting starting pitcher feels deep right now. We talked about this a lot because of how many interesting options have emerged this year. But how many of those interesting options are like stable, worry-free, no question marks kind of guys? Not that many. Like the starting pitcher position is full of interesting pitchers with question marks. So if the question marks are going to be there anyway, why not shoot for maximum upside, which Skenes provides? I mean, Skenes could be a top 10 pitcher the rest of the way. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. He certainly has the stuff for it. So 25th, I was looking at my rankings. I didn't want to rank him as high as 25th, but you get to 25th in the starting pitcher rankings, at least for me. 26th is Joe Ryan. And behind him, maybe Joe Ryan isn't the best test case because he's kind of just a weird pitcher that's hard to evaluate for a number of reasons. And you're going to see a wide variety of opinions on him. But after Joe Ryan, you get into the injured group of Jesus Luzardo, Grayson Rodriguez, and Bobby Miller. So that's kind of a cutoff for me where I tend to slot a bunch of injured guys. And then behind them, I have Tanner Bybee. I have Nick Lodolo. I have Bailey Ober. I think I'd pretty easily take Paul Skenes over them. Like if somebody offered me Paul Skenes for Bailey Ober right now, you want to take that? I'd take that. Joe Ryan, again, maybe that's, I have him just ahead of Joe Ryan, and maybe that's a little more questionable, but you don't have to go that far behind Joe Ryan to run into pitchers who have their own issues like Paul Skenes does and not quite the same upside, because who has quite the same upside? Do you get what I'm saying? Does that seem disagreeable to you? Because a lot of people had a lot of problems with this, with my ranking Paul Skenes 25th.
I agree with the logic completely. I disagree with the ranking also completely because I have Paul Skenes at SP 49, and I think I had him around 70th or 75th. He gets called up. I'm like, okay, I'm going to move him into my top 50. I thought that was pretty aggressive. Clearly, you are ranking more with the mindset of his ceiling, which I totally get. Me, I am ranking more with an eye on what the floor could be here for some of the reasons that you brought up. The fact that his first start pitching on normal rest, he wasn't as dominant in that outing. And the fact that we have already seen the Pirates limit Jared Jones in a few starts already this season as well.
In a few starts, but he's mostly been allowed to go.
And I think there's a chance that we could see that from Paul Skenes as well. And then on top of that, he is a rookie. And I think there is a chance that he could struggle. There's a chance.
Oh, for sure.
Also a chance that he could be amazing. I put him at SP 49, and I have him just behind names. I mean, guys that have done it for a while. I'm not going to doubt that Paul Skenes has higher upside than these guys, but like I have Berrios at 42, Bassett at 43. Kikuchi has been really good for like almost a year now. Hunter Green has turned it on recently. Garrett Crochet, he's had some hiccups, but by all of the metrics that we like to use, K to walk rate, underlying ERA estimators, he's been really good as well. So that was kind of a range where I thought we were starting to get into pitchers with lots of question marks. And that's why I put Paul Skenes where I did.
But I'm looking at some of the pitchers you have ranked ahead of Paul Skenes by as many as 10 spots. You're telling me you would not trade Justin Verlander for Paul Skenes right now? You would not trade Jose Berrios for Paul Skenes right now? I have a hard time believing you on that, Frank.
Yeah, there's an argument for it. I mean, I was thinking like realistically, how high could I get him? And I looked at that like mid-30s range. You brought up Bailey Ober. Tanner Bybee, who we'll talk about, has just been like very unreliable so far this season. Mm-hmm. I have Ranger Suarez at 34. That might be too high. I think Kyle Bradish is a really hard pitcher to rank right now. I put him 35th. I could make the argument of moving Paul Skenes as high as there, but I also want to make it very known that like if he comes out and he pitches really well, I have no problem moving him up further.
Yeah, okay. You may have missed your chance to buy on him, but to get back to the buy or sell question here. Well, first let me say, I think part of the disconnect is that your evaluation of Skenes relative to a Bailey Ober or Justin Verlander type, I think it can depend largely on the kind of league you play in. And in the deep 15-team roto leagues that are very popular within the fantasy baseball commentariat, you can't afford to sacrifice a Bailey Ober. You know, you're going to be ruined if that trade doesn't work out. But in a shallower league, which our rankings are built on because far more people play in those leagues, you know, if you trade Bailey Ober for it doesn't work out, you'll probably be able to replace him decently enough on the waiver wire, if not with a starting pitcher on your bench. It's just, the loss is far more manageable, so you can afford to take a bigger risk for upside. And you know, we build our rankings for 12-team leagues. We don't build them for 15-team leagues, so that's part of the reason I'm putting him that high. But to get back, I'm still with us, right?
Yeah, it was a little laggy there, but you're here.
To get back to the question of whether you sell on him or not. So I put this to the test on Twitter. I put out a poll: Paul Skenes or Joe Ryan rest of season. So my 25th ranked pitcher, Skenes; 26th, Joe Ryan. 60% people took Skenes over Ryan. So the main reason I'm ranking Skenes where I do is because I'm trying to properly assess his value so that people can make trade determinations off of that. If you don't think Skenes deserves to be in the top 25, 60% of people who responded to my poll disagree with you. And that presents you with a tremendous sell opportunity that I wouldn't necessarily discourage you to take advantage of. Myself, Paul Skenes, the hype where it is with him just being called up, you know, if I could combine Paul Skenes with a lesser piece and turn them into Kevin Gausman or turn them into Pablo Lopez, I'd take advantage of that myself, because there is a good chance, as you talk about, Frank, that Skenes loses value from here, that he goes 3 1/3 innings in his first start and gives up 4 earned runs, and then people are kind of squeamish at that point. So, you know, his value could change significantly after one start. I think me slotting him in the top 25 accurately represents his value now. And you'll have to decide if the reward is worth the risk and make it's a good time to make a decision right now. Because he could end up losing a lot of value after that first start.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm in the minority of your Twitter audience, Scott, but if that's the way people are actually valuing Paul Skenes, I would absolutely be looking to sell and get top 25 starting pitcher value in return, obviously for redraft. Like, I don't want to talk about this like I'm a Paul Skenes hater. I'm very excited to watch him pitch, but I think we do have to be realistic from a redraft perspective. Dynasty, obviously, keeper leagues, we're much more excited about him. Again, he's the top pitching prospect in baseball and maybe one of the top pitching prospects of all time. That is Paul Skenes. We do have to keep the show moving. But yeah, Let us know in the comments or tweet at us. Who do you agree more with? Should he be closer to SP25 or closer to SP50? I would be interested to know what the people think. Let's take our first break. When we return, we'll get into everything else that happened here on Wednesday. There's a lot going on. We'll talk about it right after this.
Golf's brightest stars head to the Bluegrass State for the second major of the season. The PGA Championship, May 18th and 19th on CBS.
Welcome back in, and let's finally get into the players of the night.
Holy Toledo! The Allen with a surprise reigns supreme.
Holy Toledo. A call from the Oakland A's because, Scott, both of our players of the night play for the Oakland A's. Hopefully people don't shut off the podcast. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go first, I guess. I'm going to go with Shea Langeliers, who came within a single of the cycle on Wednesday. He went, sorry, I lost his name here in my notes. He went 3 for 4 with his 8th home run, his 2nd triple, his 4th double. And he's been hitting pretty well lately, especially with those power numbers. Like I said, 8 home runs. That's an impressive number for a catcher to this point. Shea Langeliers obviously plays a lot. And it caused me to take a second look at how this season is going. There's a lot to like. We were just talking yesterday about potential replacements for Wilson Contreras. I don't think Langeliers' name even came up. He's only 30% rostered. He's out there in a lot of leagues. He's actually underperformed his expected stats so far. His expected batting average is 247, which for a power hitting catcher is, you'd take a batting average around 250 for sure. And his X slug is 530. And I think the most encouraging change from one year to the next, he was striking out 29% of the time last year. A strikeout rate that I would say is difficult to overcome unless you're just a massive exit velocity guy. So 29% last year is down to 22% this year. It's improvement, notable improvement for a hitter in his 2nd full season now. And it's the kind of growth that we shouldn't find terribly shocking. I mean, his top prospect back in the day, he was the key piece in the Matt Olson deal. And if nothing else, he's delivering big power numbers. So I'm not saying Shea Langeliers is a top 12 catcher in fantasy, but he deserves to be rostered in more than 30% of leagues. And I think is, in a broad sense, good.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the roster rate, 30%, 7 games next week, all on the road for Shea Langeliers. And we are looking for catcher replacements with the injury to Wilson Contreras. We had some other big games too. Elias Diaz went 2 for 4 with his 3rd home run. He's batting over 300 so far this season. Mitch Garver starting to wake up a little bit. He went 2 for 3 with his 4th home run over his last 11 games. He's batting 263 with 3 of those 4 home runs. Scott, if you are, I guess, just planning for next week, who would you take between Diaz, Garver, and Langeliers? Diaz is on the road, so probably not him.
Yeah, probably not him. I obviously haven't looked at the matchups yet because I will do that tomorrow. But I would say I would lean Langeliers, I think, between him and Garver. Now, rest of season, I'm going to rank Garver higher, but unless you're in a 2-catcher league, you can go week to week with catchers pretty easily.
All right, my player of the night is going to be Brent Rooker, who, he gets in these zones. You could say this about a lot of power hitters, and he is just rocking the ball right now. 5 for 9 across the doubleheader with his 9th home run, added 4 runs, 3 RBI since returning to the A's. I believe he was on the IL before that. On April 19th, his last 18 games, Brent Rooker is batting .313 with 7 homers, 16 runs, and 19 RBI. Again, he's done that in only 18 games, in his past 18 games. So 56% rostered, 7 road games next week. He popped 30 home runs with the Oakland A's last year. And again, there were times where, you ride the hot streak, and then I think, there were other times where he was droppable in shallower leagues just because, that's the kind of player who Brent Rooker is. But Scott, would you be looking to add Rooker in 3 outfielder leagues? That was a question I was getting here on Wednesday.
I mean, I wouldn't trust him to be a fixture in my 3 outfielder league lineup. But if you've been like, it's outfield is the thinnest position. If you've been struggling to fill that third spot, I don't see why Rooker wouldn't be a candidate for you right now. I mean, the guy has a 992 OPS for the season. And I don't think it's going to end up there. He just happens to be really hot right now, but he hit 30 homers last season. The power is legitimate. I think he's a fixture in that lineup at this point, and he'll have his cold stretches, I'm sure, but I wouldn't mind using him in a 3 outfielder league right now if I thought he was as good as I was going to do. I'm looking at the matchups for Oakland next week, since we already talked about Langeliers. Astros for 4 games, Royals for 3. So a nice full 7-game week, a mixture of good pitchers and bad pitchers, but overall it doesn't look like an imposing slate there for the Athletics lineup. So yeah, I think Rooker would be a fine choice to use.
I gave you 4 outfielders yesterday that we spoke about off the waiver wire. Verdugo, Brian De La Cruz, who actually hit another home run here on Wednesday. He's up to 8 homers now. Lars Nootbaar and Max Kepler. Would you take Rooker over all of those names? Again, it was Kepler, Nootbaar, De La Cruz, and Verdugo.
I would take Nootbaar tops of that group, regardless of format. I would take Rooker second in a roto league. I would take Verdugo second in a points league. I would take TJ Friedl over all of them.
That was my next question. 2 other names who performed well here on Wednesday. TJ Friedl went 2 for 4 with an RBI and his first steal, and Joe Adell went 2 for 4 with his 5th home run. It sounds like you would take Friedl ahead. What about Brent Rooker versus Joe Adell?
I'd rather start Rooker right now, but it's kind of an upside versus, it's kind of a ceiling play versus a floor play. Notice how carefully I said floor. And Adele is the obviously the ceiling play. So if it's for a bench spot, I'd probably take him. Though he had fallen into a deep dark slump prior to this performance Wednesday. He had begun the month of May. This is Joe Adell we're talking about. 1 for 20 prior to this 2 for 4 performance Wednesday. So, hardly an open and shut case.
Yeah, I think I would take Rooker ahead of Joe Adell. I move Rooker up in the rankings inside of my top 60, I believe. So he absolutely needs to be rostered in all 5 outfielder leagues. And based on his roster rate, he probably already is. Want to give an honorable mention to the Bronx Bombers, because they are doing exactly that right now. Juan Soto is off to an awesome start with the Yankees. He went 3 for 5 with his 9th home run, added 5 RBI. He's batting .338 with a .437 on base percentage. Aaron Judge is coming around. He went 3 for 5 with his 8th home run, and over his last 11 games, he's batting .385 with 4 home runs, 11 RBI, and 1 steal. And Giancarlo Stanton in the past 2 days has hit 2 of the 3 hardest hit balls in all of baseball. His 8th home run here on Wednesday, the hardest hit baseball this season, 119.9 miles per hour. And then yesterday it was 118.8 exit velocity. He is up to 8 home runs. He's got 20 RBI. It's something like a 35 home run pace. I think he's kind of a similar player to Brent Rooker. He's probably in that range. I think you wrote him up as like someone who doesn't need to be rostered right now. Scott, are you with that with Stanton?
Yeah, I mean, in 3 outfielder points league, Stanton doesn't need to be rostered. He's going to strike out too much. He hits balls very hard. This has been going on this is, I think, the 4th year of this, with very high quality of contact, but just terrible numbers apart from the home runs, which are, it's not like he's delivering league leading home run totals. It's just fine. Okay, so it's the 4th season of him doing this. I'm sorry, the 3rd season of him doing this, not the 4th. Yeah, it was the 5th hardest hit home run in StatCast history too.
Wow,
I will point out. So it was a serious poke.
If there's one thing that Stanton is still good at, it is hitting the ball extremely hard.
Yeah.
We just need him to stay on the field long enough to continue doing
Well,
that.
not just that. He doesn't get enough hits apart from home runs. Like he wastes. It's kind of funny because these balls, both of the balls you were talking about, 2 of the 3 hardest hit of the season were home runs. But it's hard to hit a home run as hard as 118, 119 miles per hour. So he kind of like wastes his exit velocity on home runs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, both of them didn't, they weren't like high, majestic home runs. They were frozen ropes in the outfield, and they just kept traveling. And that was it.
I don't know. It's been hard to fit. I mean, the strikeouts are an issue, but usually you hit the ball that hard, you can overcome a high strikeout rate. So I don't know why Stanton has fallen into this 3-year rut, but at this point, I don't really expect him to come out of it.
All right, let's run through the news and notes. Christian Yelich was activated out of nowhere and was in the lineup as the DH, batting third for the Brewers. Tyler Black was optioned back to AAA. Scott, if you added Tyler Black this past weekend, is he someone you need to hold on to or drop now that he was demoted?
I guess it depends on the format. If it's one of those 15-team roto leagues where you probably dropped a pretty penny into him in the hopes of getting a nice speed contribution, I'd be reluctant to drop him. I think he'll be back sooner than later. But if you're in something shallower than that, if you're in the sort of league where Brent Rooker is available, for instance, I don't think you need to cling tightly to Tyler Black.
Pirates director of sports medicine Todd Tomchik said ankle concerns will likely be something Oneil Cruz has to deal with throughout the season. He suffered a fractured left ankle in April of last year, and it might explain why Cruz has struggled so far this season. Didn't really sound like this is something that's going to go away, at least not this year. Worth mentioning that Cruz went 2 for 4 with a double and 3 RBI on Wednesday, and shout out to Malik Armstrong, tagged me on Twitter that over the past 15 games, Oneil Cruz is batting .327 with a .510 slug. So he's been coming around, but it was just interesting timing to reveal this report about the ankle. Are you concerned, Scott, long-term with Oneil Cruz?
Well, I don't think the ankle is causing him to strike out 35% of the time. And that's my biggest gripe with what Cruz is doing so far.
Have you ever tried to swing a bat with a bad ankle, Scott? Come on.
I mean, no. But given that 35% strikeout rate isn't exactly outside the norm for Cruz, I don't know. If you told me coming into the season that he was going to strike out 35% of the time, I would say he's doing about what I thought he'd do. And I say that, I guess, with him having a sub 700 OPS right now, or maybe it just got over 700 with his performance today. And okay, so technically I would expect him to do a little better than that, but I don't think I've kind of written off the possibility of him performing like a top 5 shortstop this year. Top 10, still think that's possible and even likely, but not top 5.
Again, that is Oneil Cruz. Let's keep it moving. Blake Snell will throw a bullpen Thursday and begin a rehab assignment at Single A on Sunday. Grayson Rodriguez threw 15 pitches off the mound on Wednesday, his first time doing so since landing on the IL with right shoulder inflammation. Christian Encarnacion Strand was placed in the IL after tests revealed a fracture in his right wrist, and he's expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. So I think I jinxed him.
I thought I saw 6 to 8, 4 to 6.
It might be. Yeah. Let's say 4 to 8, I guess.
It got worse.
I think I have jinxed Encarnacion Strand. I gave him a bold prediction that he'd be this year's Austin Riley. That has not worked out. He had an opportunity to seize with Noelvi Marte suspended. And now by the time he's ready to return, Noelvi Marte is getting ready to return as well. So it hasn't worked out for Encarnacion Strand. The Reds started Jeimer Candelario at first with Santiago Espinal at third.
Who's been terrible? Candelario himself has been terrible. I think Noelvi Marte is going to have an easy time regaining a job one way or another.
Yeah. And I think he's eligible to return early June, right?
I think it's like June 21st.
Okay.
But I will say the article I'm looking at here it does say 4 to 6 for Encarnacion Strand, not 6 to 8.
Okay.
So you had that right. Maybe you're right about the Marte thing too. Maybe I'm just wrong about everything.
No.
Maybe you're right about Paul Skenes, and maybe
No. 80 games probably is closer to like mid to late June, though. That makes more sense.
this. I mean, the thing is, Encarnacion Strand was playing with this injury for like the last week because they thought it wasn't a fracture, and he had missed just a few days and was back in the lineup. So that's kind of the weird part of this story. But in any case, we're not going to see him for a while. He was also on that article, those 24 players that you're okay to drop in a shallow league. Encarnacion Strand was. It's a gimme now that you're not going to see him for close to 2 months. Obviously, in those 15-team roto leagues, you have to hold on.
All right. Max Scherzer will remain shut down from throwing for the next few days due to a right thumb and a forearm issue. I believe this is the first time we're hearing of a forearm. And I've got to say, for a pitcher as old as Max Scherzer, don't love it. Don't love a forearm. Don't love hearing that. Bo Bichette was moved down to 6th in the Blue Jays lineup. He finished 1 for 4 with an RBI and run scored. He is batting 191 on the season with a 1.9% barrel rate. He's been very bad. Brian Wu is expected to rejoin the Mariners during their upcoming homestand. Emerson Hancock was optioned back to AAA. Zach Geloff has been cleared for a rehab assignment at AAA this weekend. Sean Murphy has progressed to hitting in the batting cage. He's already missed nearly 6 weeks with a left oblique strain. Ryan Pepio was placed in the IL with a left lower leg contusion, retroactive to May 6th. It doesn't sound like it's going to be a long stay on the IL. Edward Cabrera was placed in the IL with that recurring right shoulder impingement. The Marlins also reinstated Braxton Garrett, who is set to make his season debut Sunday against the Phillies. Shane Baz will make his second rehab start at AAA on Friday. He only threw 39 pitches in his first rehab outing, and Shane Baz is 47% rostered. I'd like to say Baz is a mustache, Scott, but there are already so many injuries. I don't know if that's possible.
He's not a mustache. He's a person. And I think I mean, all the injuries, it would be hard to say, I doubt there are many people out there with an open IL spot. That just makes it an easy decision. But I did, and we're going to get to this segment soon, I did move Shane Baz up in my rankings into the top 80, which puts him between Brady Singer and Eric Fetty. So it's time to be on alert for Shane Baz, who a couple years ago was the closest thing to Paul Skenes that a couple years ago had to offer. And a lot of upside.
All right. Dane Dunning was placed in the IL with a right rotator cuff strain, retroactive to May 5th. Chaz McCormick could begin a rehab assignment this weekend. He's on the IL with hamstring soreness. Jorge Soler was placed on the IL with a right shoulder strain. Elliot Ramos was recalled from AAA. Taj Bradley is slated to make his season debut Friday. He is 53% rostered. Scott, what's your interest level in Taj Bradley?
Less than Baz.
Okay. Tyler Soderstrom was recalled by the A's and started the second game of their doubleheader at first base. He went 2 for 5 with his first home run, added 2 RBI. He did have 7 home runs at AAA this season. And I think, again, we need catchers and deeper 2-catcher leagues. Soderstrom is a name that could matter. So
fortunately, he's eligible at catcher in CBS Sports League. Uncle Scott looking out for you on that one, because he isn't he's DH only on a lot of other sites. Yep. And I could walk you through the methodology, but it's probably not worth the time investment. I do wonder, is this going to impact Shea Langeliers' playing time after I talked up Langeliers? You would think the A's would want as much offense as they could get in the lineup, and Langeliers presents more than a lot of their choices. But I doubt they brought up Soderstrom to sit. He could play mostly first base, I guess.
Yeah, the fact that he played first base in his first game up, it's not a great lineup. I'm sure he could play DH as well, so I wouldn't worry too much about it affecting Langeliers, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong many times before. Let's take our final break. When we return, two pitchers that look like they've discovered their stud status, and that will lead us into our rankings, risers, and fallers. We'll do that right after this.
And they're starting to get in the groove.
So impressive.
Lock your schedules. Aces are coming to CBS Sports Network.
Welcome back in, and two stud pitchers. I think they're back. Dylan Cease was ridiculous. At the Cubs, he threw 7 shutout innings, 1 hit, 2 walks, 12 strikeouts with 24 swinging strikes on 113 pitches. His fastball velocity is up so far this year, 97.3 miles per hour in this start. Last year, it was 95.6. So the fastball is closer to where it was in 2022, and that might just make all the difference. The fact that he isn't walking as many batters obviously helps as well. And Chris Sale has looked great. He got his revenge. Although, I don't really think there's revenge here. I think he should be happy that the Red Sox traded him to the Atlanta Braves. But, just for the, we'll do it for the storytelling. 6 shutout innings, 6 hits, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts for Sale, 20 swinging strikes on 103 pitches. He has been awesome so far this season. That slider specifically had 13 whiffs in this start, and it has been really, really good so far. Chris Sale, a 2.95 ERA, a .98 whip. Scott, I moved Chris Sale up to, he's inside of my top 20 starting pitchers, and Dylan Cease is now inside of my top 15. What do you think?
I'm higher on both than you are.
Oh,
haha.
Darn it.
Yeah, I moved Cease up to 14th in Roto, 16th in points, because in points leagues I have Logan Webb and Aaron Nola ahead of him, because strikeouts aren't as important in points leagues, and that's what Cease is best at. So, I'm buying to a certain extent. I certainly think he has ace potential. We saw it 2 years ago. I'm not really sure why he's so much better. The walks are down. The walks are the lowest they've ever been, but he's still throwing just 61% of his pitches for strikes. That's not good. It's not any better than last year. He's just making the strikes count, I guess. Could it continue? I think it could continue, or he could start walking more guys and maybe drop outside of the top 15. But there's enough reason for hope here that I'm with you in putting him in the top 15. And Sale's been in my top 20 for a while. I talk about those pitchers who show a lot of potential, a lot of reason for optimism, but have question marks that hold us back. Performance-wise, I don't feel like Sale has any question marks. The question marks are, is he just going to get hurt again? But
yeah,
it was such the sort of injuries he was suffering the last few years were just kind of all over the place. So there was a degree of randomness there that makes me less concerned about that question mark for him than whatever question mark we have for Bailey Ober, for instance.
All right, let's get into the rest of our rankings, risers and fallers. Scott, we'll start with the risers. Feel free to mention all the names, but if you're going to go in depth, maybe just focus on like 1 or 2 of those.
All righty. So some of the risers that I sent to you include Ryan Jeffers. Let's start with that one because people have been clamoring for us to move him up in the rankings. Got him in the top 13 last week. Here's where I have Ryan Jeffers now. You ready for this? 8th in Roto, 7th in points at the catcher position. I mean,
I moved him up to 9th in both.
Yeah, there. Say I got you beat again. Beating you on everybody. So that puts him ahead of Jonah Heim and Luis Campusano and Logan O'Hoppe. And frankly, that seems like a pretty easy call. I also have Jeffers ahead of Cal Raleigh in points leagues where the strikeouts hold back Raleigh a bit. Jeffers has been great with the strikeouts. Jordan Westberg, who I famously said I didn't think had the potential to be a top 12 second baseman early this season. Well, I now have him 7th at second base. Yeah. Yeah. I've moved him ahead of Xander Bogaerts and Gleyber Torres and a lot of those struggling second basemen who I don't feel like have stud upside anyway. I think Jordan Westberg might have them beat in the upside department. And yeah, it's not like you're feeling too good about Bogarts and Torres right now anyway. So he's ahead of them. He's ahead of Nico Horner, Andres Jimenez, etc. Let's see here. Tarek Skubal. Chris brought up after Tarek Skubal's last start that maybe he should just be the number one pitcher in fantasy. Well, I made him number 2. I went almost all the way there. Zach Wheeler, I have number 1 because, he's just such a workhorse. And with the additions to his arsenal this season, he looks like the best version of Zach Wheeler we've ever seen and just seems like an ace among aces. So I had to keep Zach Wheeler at the top, but Tarek Skubal's number 2 now. I mentioned earlier I moved Shane Baz into my top 80. I moved Brian Wu into my top 65. I moved Braxton Garrett into my top 85. Just getting ready to, anticipating the return of these IL players who are Wu and Garrett especially. They're going to start next time through for their respective teams. I moved Christian Scott into the top 50. Let me see if I can provide you with a little context for that, who he's ahead of. So I moved him ahead of Nick Pivetta, who did not look so great in his return today. Mitch Keller, how about that? Got Christian Scott ahead of Keller. Somebody offered me that in the podcast league, Keller for Scott straight up. I thought about it, but I said no. 3 spots different in my rankings. I got him ahead of Carlos Rodon, who looked good today. We'll talk about him later. I got him ahead of Walker Buehler. So Christian Scott, I have about where you have Paul Skenes, Frank. Paul Skenes or Christian Scott?
I actually thought about that today, and I got Skenes at 49. I think I have Scott at 56, so he's just behind. I would prefer Paul Skenes, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Those are my risers.
Okay. Some risers for me. I moved Christopher Morel inside of my top 16 third baseman and inside the top 30 outfielders. Willy Adames is now my number 13 shortstop in both formats. I moved him ahead of both Anthony Volpe and Willy Adames. That is who I'm talking about. I moved him ahead of Xander Bogaerts. So Bogaerts is off to a rough start. Volpe's come back down to earth. Adames is playing for a contract. He's someone we really liked last year as well. So really like what I've seen from him so far. 3 outfielders. My 19th, 20th, and 21st ranked outfielders in head-to-head points. Tyler O'Neill, Riley Green, and Brendan Nimmo. Scott, I just saw that you have Riley Green 40th in your outfield rankings.
Yeah, that needs to change. I've updated everything but outfield and relief pitcher. I ran out of time. When the
you should have told me beforehand. I wouldn't have called you out.
I should have. You're right. No, I still need to update outfield. But yeah, Riley Green needs to get up into the top 30. I would imagine. Where did you say you put him?
I moved him up to 20th in head-to-head points.
I don't know that I'll have him quite that high, but yeah, needs to be higher than 40th for sure.
And then another riser for me was Kyle Bradish. He's a name I mentioned earlier. I think he's a little bit difficult to rank right now because, as we mentioned after his season debut last week, he was a pitcher I really liked coming into the season before we knew about the injury. I think I had him ranked as a top 24 starting pitcher. The idea of this slightly torn or sprained UCL is still in the back of my mind, and I think it presents a lot of risk. Sure. But so far, he's pitched really well, and he pitched well again here on Wednesday. He threw 5 innings, 1 run, 9 strikeouts with 12 swinging strikes on 90 pitches. Velocity has been fine so far in each of his first 2 starts. I moved Bradish up to SP 35. I can see the argument for him being lower based on the risk, but he's a guy that I liked a lot, and he's healthy for now. So I moved him up that high.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I have him 49th, which sounds like a big difference, 14 spots difference. But it's a really, really elastic group.
Yes, certainly is. I could have Paul Skenes in that group after his first start this weekend. Who knows? Let's get into some of the fallers, Scott. Who were some of the players sliding down your rankings?
Sliding down for me. Okay, so probably the most notable. I guess let's start with Trey Turner, who's sliding for obvious reasons. He's out for the next 6 weeks. How does that impact his value in a practical sense? I moved him to 8th in my rest of season shortstop rankings, which drops him behind some obvious names like like Gunnar Henderson and Corey Seager and Francisco Lindor, but also CJ Abrams. Somebody came to me today offering CJ Abrams for Trey Turner. I am buying into CJ Abrams enough that I think I'd do it. Obviously, it depends somewhat on who else I have filling in for Turner, blah, blah, blah. But generally speaking, I'm going to take Abrams over Turner right now. Paul Goldschmidt might be the struggling stud bat who I'm most worried about. And I'm pretty close to just saying finito.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, I got him down to 11th in roto, 13th in head-to-head. I could go lower. So that moves him. The reason he's lower in head-to-head is because I moved him behind Yandy Diaz and Vinny Pasquantino. They got the great plate discipline. And so, I value them more in points leagues. I have Goldschmidt ahead of them still. It gets tricky with guys like Alec Boehm and Isaac Paredes, who have been great so far, obviously, but I don't think have close to the upside of Goldschmidt. Am I ready to move Goldschmidt behind them? Not yet. But boy, if somebody offered me a Paul Goldschmidt for Isaac Paredes right now, I'd really have a hard time with that.
I don't think I would take it either. Goldschmidt was one of those names, and there were a few of these when I was doing the rankings where I thought about lowering them. I couldn't do it yet, but I am close to that point. And Nolan Arenado was another one like that. Alex Bregman was another one I thought about putting down, but ultimately I did not lower any of those names. Gleyber Torres was another one, but let me give them a few more weeks and see what happens.
I'm totally cool with Bregman. I think he's going to be fine. Kind of worried about Nolan Arenado, but very worried about Goldschmidt, obviously. Okay, so Michael Busch, I've had to come back to reality with him, and I've moved him behind Alec Boehm and Isaac Paredes, which may seem obvious. I also moved him behind Christopher Morel at third base. I moved him behind Jake Cronenworth at first base. And Cronenworth continues to climb the rankings for me. At second, he's now 13th, and looks like you have him there too. And then finally, Eric Fetty, I referenced him earlier. He's back outside of the top 75 for me, which puts him in very droppable territory. It was a disappointing follow-up to those two great starts, and there's just not much margin for error when you're pitching for the White Sox. Mm-hmm. I think on a good team, Eric Fetty might be a top 60 pitcher for me, but on the White Sox, he's outside of the top 75.
All right, some fallers for me in the rankings. I moved my 17th, 18th, and 19th ranked first baseman right now are Yandy Diaz, Spencer Torkelson, and Michael Busch. I have lowered all of them down, and just ahead, I have Isaac Paredes at 13, Jake Cronenworth at 14, Rhys Hoskins at 15, and Nate Lowe at 16. So those are the names just ahead. They're guys that have performed well. It's pretty much backed up by the StatCast data as well. So, I'm starting to move some of those names down, like the Yandy Diaz's of the world. Nolan Gorman, he is outside my top 20 at second base. It's been a struggle. He's not playing against left-handed pitching. I moved Verlander outside of my top 40. He's, I think, SP 41. And Detmers, who has struggled recently, I moved outside of the top 50 starting pitchers. He's right behind Paul Skenes. He is my SP 52. Some of the underlying stuff is still good for Detmers, so I don't want to just bury him yet. I think there's a chance he could bounce back, but the obvious, the surface level numbers have not been there recently for Reed Detmers. Let's get into the rest of Wednesday's action. And we got to zoom on by, Scotty. Waiver wire pitchers. We had three names perform exceptionally well here. Reese Olson turned in a quality start at the Guardians. 6 innings, 2 runs. Only one of those was earned. With 4 strikeouts, he is down to a 2.52 ERA and a 1.12 WHIP. Chris Paddock continues to have these interesting starts. I want to say good because he had 10 strikeouts, but I can't really figure Chris Paddock out right now. 5 1/3 innings, 1 run, 10 strikeouts, 19 swinging strikes on 99 pitches. And in 4 starts since giving up 9 earned runs, Paddock has a 1.93 ERA and a 1.16 WHIP. So doing something right. And Gavin Stone has been turning it up recently. 7 innings, 1 run, 4 strikeouts against the Marlins. He's down to a 3.55 ERA, a 1.26 WHIP. The only problem is when I look into the pitch mix and the data, the changeup is great. And that's kind of it. That's where it ends for Gavin Stone. I just don't know that he has much else outside of that changeup. Scott, what is your interest level in Stone, Paddock, and Reese Olson?
Well, I was pretty optimistic about Stone because the swinging strike rate, was 14.4% last year, and it was about that early on this year. That's elite. But it's been sinking like a stone, even as he's performed well in his last couple outings. And yeah, he's right around the Eric Fetty range of my rankings is Gavin Stone. So I wouldn't say he's part of that really interesting group of starting pitchers that I keep referring to. Olson is, though he's on the lower end of that group, getting a lot of whiffs on both the slider and changeup still. I wish there were more strikeouts to go with it. But for the most part, Olson is performing well. He's my favorite of this group. Paddock is my least favorite, but Paddock is obviously trending the right direction. I just wish I knew what was going on with him. Because, okay, 2 amazing starts in a row. 35% sliders in the first. That was a significant change in pitch usage and might explain why he was so good in the previous outing. But it was back down to normal in this one. He mostly got the whiffs with the fastball, which is different. We'll see if it continues. I'm mostly just confused about Paddock right now, but there's obviously reason to be encouraged.
Would you take any of these names over Patrick Sandoval, who we spoke glowingly about yesterday?
I would take Olson over him. The others are they're all basically in the same category where I see the potential for them to be good, but I'm not especially convinced they're going to get there. I'm trying to see who I have ranked the highest of them. I have Gavin Stone ranked the highest. So the only one I would take Sandoval over is Paddock.
Okay. And we'll mention just the matchups quickly. Reese Olson gets the Marlins next week. Obviously, that is fantastic. Chris Paddock looks like he might line up for 2 against the Yankees and at the Guardians. He also is a SPARP, which helps in points leagues. And Gavin Stone looks like he has the Reds and at the Giants next week in a 2-star week. But we'll talk more about 2-star pitchers on tomorrow's podcast. Some names in deeper leagues. Hayden Wesneski turned in a quality start against the Padres. 6 innings, 3 runs, 3 strikeouts. Ryan Weathers had a quality start at the Dodgers. And look, if you could turn in a quality start against the Dodgers, I feel like that is a win. The way that their lineup is hitting right now. 6 innings, 3 runs, 3 strikeouts there. Mitchell Parker was solid against the Orioles. 5 2/3 innings, 2 runs, 3 strikeouts. He quietly has a 2.67 ERA and 107 WHIP so far in his 5 starts. So he's pitched well. And Chris Flexen. Yeah. He's at Tampa Bay, 6 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts, but he's Chris Flexen. Any interest in these in deeper leagues, Scott? Mitchell Parker, Weathers, and Wesneski?
Flexen's fastball was up like 2 miles per hour, which was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't really want to have to talk about this group, and I know we're running out of time. I think they're pretty uninteresting. My favorite of them is Ryan Weathers, but that's not saying much.
All right, let's get into the waiver wire hitters. We spoke about the outfielders earlier with Rooker, De La Cruz, Friedel, and Joe Adell. 2 corner infielders that could be of interest. Willie Castro has really stepped up recently, 2 for 3 with a triple and his 3rd home run. Eugenio Suarez had a big game, 2 for 3 with a sock and a shoe. His 3rd home run, his 1st stolen base. He is only batting .226 with a .641 OPS. Castro 61% rostered, Suarez 54%. Do either of those numbers need to be higher?
Suarez might need to be lower than 54%.
Yeah.
I'd have to see how it compares to other third basemen, but outside of those really deep roto leagues, I don't think Suarez needs to be rostered. Castro maybe could go up a little from 61%, but I think his main contribution is going to be as a versatile steal specialist in standard roto leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 61 is about right. I don't know.
I do want to quickly look up. Yeah, Castro is 64% rostered on Yahoo, which most of their leagues are daily head-to-head categories. I think that is a great format for Willie Castro. So if you play in a format like that, whenever he's in the lineup, he's been playing a lot recently. obviously does have a lot of stolen base upside. That is Willie Castro. Some names in deeper leagues. Leody Taveras, we spoke about yesterday. He had a big day across the doubleheader, went 2 for 8 with his second home run, 3 runs, 2 RBI. Last 12 games, batting .357 with 2 homers and 13 runs scored. I missed this one over the weekend, but the White Sox promoted one of their prospects, Brian Ramos, who is a 22-year-old third baseman. He went 2 for 4 with a double, a run, and an RBI. And just interesting timing that they called him up after 24 games in Double-A, where he was not hitting well. He had a 182 batting average and a 572 OPS, but he's going to play a lot for a bad team with the White Sox. That is Brian Ramos. And Eddie Rosario is coming around, 2 for 4 with his third home run. Last 4 games, he has 2 homers and 2 steals. Very deep league stuff, Scott, but any interest in Rosario, Ramos, and Taveras, who we spoke about yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, Taveras is the most interesting of them, and I don't think he's all that interesting, as we talked about yesterday. So that's really just a comment on how uninteresting Brian Ramos and Eddie Rosario are. Ramos, I think the White Sox I forget who went down, but they lost somebody, and they just had to call up Brian Ramos out of desperation. Yeah, I don't think he was ready to be promoted or is going to really do much with it. I think he's pretty safely ignored.
Let's get into the leftovers and famous last words, Scott. I'm starting to believe in Carlos Rodon. Quality start against the Astros, 6 1/3 innings, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts to 0 walks. He had 16 swinging strikes in this outing. 8 of those came on the slider. He now has 7+ swinging strikes on the slider specifically in 3 straight starts. He's leaned on that pitch more. I haven't read this, but I kind of think the Yankees told Rodon, hey, let's try out the cutter and the changeup early in the season. And if it doesn't work, go back to the slider. And that's what he's done. And the the effectiveness has slowly crept up this season. I really like what I'm seeing. The control has improved as well. Just 3 walks total over his last 4 starts. It's a 3.56 ERA, a 126 WHIP. I'm not saying this is the Carlos Rodon of old, but I really like what I'm seeing, Scott. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm going to eat my words. Anyone who actually listened to me when I said I'd drop Carlos Rodon a couple weeks ago, because things have turned on a dime since then. And his slider is the whiff rate on, I think after this start, the whiff rate on the slider for the year is going to be about where it was in 2021 and 2022, which were the Cy Young contending seasons for Carlos Rodon. That doesn't mean he's going to be contending for a Cy Young this year, but it does mean he's probably going to be pretty good if his slider is playing that well, and he's kind of pared down his arsenal to what we know is most effective for him.
Let's get to Tanner Bybee. We mentioned him earlier. He's been pretty unreliable so far this season. He continues to struggle. He was up against the Tigers. He allowed 4 runs over 4 innings, did have 5 strikeouts to 0 walks, gave up a good amount of hard contact, 91.5 average exit velocity against, and the fastball continues to get crushed. It had a 105 exit velocity in this start and a 441 expected WOBA entering this start. So it might actually get worse. He's only completed 6 innings once in 8 starts. He's got a 491 ERA, a 136 WHIP. Looks like he's in line for 2 starts next week against the Marlins and at the Rangers. I guess you got to throw him out there, but I really do not like what I've been seeing, Scott.
Well, it's kind of a good news, bad situation. Good news, bad news situation for Tanner Bybee, who has walked 1 batter over his last 3 starts. And that's more what we were promised when he was coming up through the minors, an elite control pitcher. And it seemed like the walks were the main thing holding him back coming into this year. But yeah, he's just throwing the fastball too much. To use a stat everybody's heard of, batters are hitting over 400 against the fastball, and he's throwing it 45% of the time. So probably needs to stop doing that. And he's in a good organization to figure things out. The Guardians are about as good as any at maximizing pitcher outcomes, and this is as talented of a pitcher as they've developed in I don't know. I guess Gavin Williams is on the same level in terms of talent level, but is a really, really talented pitcher. And I think they're going to figure it out. I mentioned earlier he was still pretty high in my rankings, Tanner Bybee. And I would consider him a buy low.
I heard that dig in there, Scott. I heard what you said.
I'm not sure I know what I said.
Because I said he has a 441 xWOBA on his fastball, and you're like, to use a stat everyone has heard of.
Oh yeah, I mean, I
heard it.
It makes the same case in a way that's very familiar to people. Not that, people listening to this podcast probably know xWOBA well enough, but everybody knows batting average.
Yeah, the point is the fastball has been bad for Tanner Bybee.
Yeah.
That's the bigger point. Hitters that are quietly getting it done. Bobby Witt has been ridiculous. He went 2 for 3 with a walk and his 5th home run. He is batting .327, 5 homers, 13 steals, 36 runs scored in 38 games. He is on a near 160 run pace this season. Bobby Witt has been awesome. Teoscar Hernandez also quietly been great. 2 for 3 with his 10th home run. He's got 26 runs, 29 RBI. He entered the day as the 6th best outfielder in Roto, the 9th best outfielder in head-to-head points leagues. Marcell Ozuna, 2 for 3 with a double dong, 4 RBI. He's up to 12 home runs on the season. I believe that leads all of baseball. 38 RBI. Did I say that? 12 home runs, 38 RBI, and a 1042 OPS. Jeremy Pena, 3 for 4 with his 4th home run. Bryce Terang continues to impress. 3 for 4 with 3 doubles, a walk, a run, and an RBI. His first time leading off this season. I think I got Terang inside of my top 15 or 16 at second base. So he's slowly been moving up, and I'm starting to buy in a little bit more. Anything else on this group, Scott?
I don't think I've moved Terang quite that high, but it's getting harder to justify keeping him out. I mean, there still isn't a lot that's impressive there under the hood. His strikeout rate is considerably improved from his rookie season, and he's putting the ball on the ground more, which we normally don't like. But when you don't have much raw power, which is true in Terang's case, it's probably better to put the ball on the ground when your main tool is speed, So between the lack of strikeouts and putting the ball in the air less, and the exit velocity readings are improved some. They're still not great. Maybe he's just good now in a Nico Horner sort of way, and is actually running like we thought Nico Horner would, and that would be good news for his fantasy outcomes. Jeremy Pena, I love what he's doing. I think this is a true breakout for him. I've struggled to get him into the top 15 at shortstop, but I basically value him like a top 15 shortstop. Ozuna, my gosh. One of my biggest regrets. I was drafting, like our earliest mock drafts, I was getting Ozuna in like every single one. And then I didn't get him in a single league that mattered. Just because, I don't know. I got distracted by other things at that point. I thought he was a great value, but I also thought, well, Eloy Jimenez looks like a great value, and JD Martinez and Byron Buxton to an extent, and I'll just wait for them. And you know what? I shouldn't have, because Ozuna is the one of them who's actually good. Not that I've lost hope for JD Martinez, but it's not going to do what Ozuna's doing, and I think more or less will continue to do. Not that he's going to sustain these exact paces, but he's going to be a stud just like he was last year.
Let's run through the bullpen updates because there was a lot of bullpen happenings here. For the Angels, Estevez got the 9th with a 1-run lead. He struck out 2 for his 6th save. For the Blue Jays, Jordan Romano got the 9th with a 3-run lead. He gave up 1 run on 3 hits, but picked up his 5th save of the season. For the Tigers, what's going on here? Jason Foley got the 7th inning with a 2-run lead. He got 2 outs. He gave up a hit, and he was relieved by Joey Wentz. It was then Andrew Chafin who started the 9th with a 1-run lead. He gave up a solo homer to David Fry. Alex Lang then came in to get the final out of the 9th. He started the 10th where he gave up a walk-off single. This was Jason Foley's first appearance since blowing a save against the Yankees last Friday. I'm not ready to make any declarations, Scott, but this kind of feels like a mess in the Tigers bullpen.
And have you seen his whip?
It's bad.
It's bad. Too many walks, too many hits. Like this is not a closer caliber performance for Jason Foley and not Andrew Lang, that's a former Hawks center, but Alex Lang. He's walking too many guys still, but he's been effective overall. And he was the presumed closer going in. He was the closer last year. He's not the only option that AJ Hinch could turn to, but AJ Hinch has options, and I'm a little worried about Foley. So I agree with you on that one. Yeah, let's keep going.
For the Royals, Tyler Duffy started the ninth with a 4-run lead. He gave up a run on 2 walks and a double. He was relieved by James MacArthur, who got the final 2 outs for his 8th save, and that is one day after James MacArthur blew a save. So they went right back to him.
He had thrown 60 pitches the previous 3 days.
Wow.
So good for him. Good for you, James MacArthur.
All right. Well, he got it done. For the Padres, Robert Suarez struck out 1 for his 12th save. He is tied for the league lead. For the Dodgers, Daniel Hudson got the 9th with a 2-run lead. He struck out 1 for his 2nd save. It was Alex Vesia who got a save the other day. I still think it'll be Daniel Hudson more often than not, as long as Evan Phillips is out, but wouldn't surprise me if they mix and match. For the D-backs, Kevin Ginkel got the 9th with a 2-run lead. They didn't want to use Paul Sewald 2 nights in a row, fresh off the IL. Ginkel gave up a run on 2 hits. He only recorded 1 out. And then Joe Mantiply got the final 2 outs for his first save of the season. For the White Sox, Michael Kopech got the 9th with a 3-run lead. He gave up a hit, but picked up his 3rd save. For the Orioles, Craig Kimbrell got the 9th with a 2-run lead. He got 2 quick outs and then gave up a solo homer followed by 2 walks. He was relieved by Keegan Aiken, who gave up a game-tying single to C.J. Abrams. The Orioles eventually won in 12 innings, and all of a sudden, Craig Kimbrell has been a little shaky recently.
Little shaky.
I don't know if it's due to the injury or whatnot, but
it's a full-blown, like he's blown 3 of his last 4 save chances, and it should be 4 of 5. He got bailed out in one of those, replaced mid-inning, or it would have been 4 of 5. That's rough. Like you. 8, so that's like half a blown save season total in the span of 5 appearances. Here's what Brandon Hyde had to say after the game. We're going to stick with him. This guy's got a big time track record. He's a Hall of Famer, and we need to get him right. He's big for us. It's important that we get him right. So pretty strong vote of confidence there from Brandon Hyde. And we've seen in recent years Kimbrell have stretches like this where he just can't do anything. And then he gets past it. It's like these control lapses that he has that really started late in his time with the Red Sox. So if Hyde's committed to sticking to him, I think we should be too. If you have the option to bench him, that's fine. But I think in the long run, he's still going to get a lot of saves for the Orioles.
For the Twins, Yohan Duran got the 9th with a 3-run lead. He struck out 1 for his 3rd save. And for the Rangers, Owen White started the 9th with a 4-run lead. He gave up 3 straight singles. He was relieved by Kirby Yates, who allowed 3 runs in. Only 1 was charged to him, but picked up his 7th save of the season. To stream or not to stream on Thursday, we mentioned yesterday, not a great slate. I do believe Eric Fetty has been added to this list. So we could do Fetty against the Guardians, Ben Lively at the White Sox, Michael Wacha against the Angels. I don't know.
I'd more likely do Keaton Winn at Colorado than Wacha, probably, though I'm not so keen on either. I'm not keen on any of those guys, but Fetty, Lively, Winn would be my top 3.
On Friday, we have Jameson Taillon at the Pirates. There is, who else? Christian Scott, 70% rostered. Look, he should be just rostered. He's not a streamer. I don't know that I want to play him against the Atlanta Braves, if I'm being honest.
But I'd pick him over anyone on this list.
Yeah, I think so. I would go Scott, then Taillon, and then I think Blackburn at the Mariners. Blackburn's pitched well.
Yeah, okay, fine. You'd rather not have to resort to streamers. I will point out again. Probably not for the last time. Certainly not for the first time.
Why do we even...
You forced me to do this segment, and I don't like it.
I got to give the people what they want, Scott. And they want streamers. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.